First tonight, Labor MPs have hit out at their Prime Minister for poor judgement in buying a waterfront mansion during the cost of living crisis. And Anthony Albanese's own words attacking Malcolm Turnbull's wealth came back to bite him today, showing the extent of his hypocrisy. Well, I can tell you that Labor MPs are shocked and incredulous at Albanese's decision to buy a $4.3 million clifftop holiday home during this economic crisis. One Labor MP told me today, this one will cut through. Do people think he gets the cost of living crisis when he's buying a holiday house like this? And a Labor insider said to me, Labor members must be wondering if their captain has his head in the game and his eye on the ball. Former Labor State Secretary Cameron Milner said, this is either total incompetence or sublime arrogance when it comes to Albo's political touch. The danger for Labor is this retirement home might be the perfect combination of both. And a Labor MP also told the Sydney Morning Herald, I can't think of a greater act of self-sabotage in my life. I am gobsmacked. And there's widespread concern inside Labor about the MPs who are up against the Greens in marginal seats, where housing affordability is the single biggest issue. And this is a gift to the Greens. It's spectacularly poor political judgment from Albanese. Now, here was Albanese back in 2008 saying that Turnbull, who was then just newly installed as the Liberal leader, was out of touch because of his wealth.
A reborn friend of the battler over here, the leader of the opposition from Struggle Street in Point Piper.
Struggle Street in Point Piper. Well, what does Albo have to say now about Struggle Street on a waterfront mansion? Then a decade later, in 2018, the class war-obsessed Labor MP was still going for the jugular based on where Turnbull lived.
Malcolm Turnbull might be okay looking after the people of Point Piper. He's not good at looking after the people of Narangba and the people of Caboolture and the people of Morayfield and the people of this community.
That is what you call hypocrisy. And now, in the middle of a financial crisis, most Australians wouldn't be able to afford a $4 million house at all, let alone a spare $4.3 million to splash on a holiday home. The Prime Minister is meant to lead the country during an economic crisis, but he's lost touch with what Australians are actually going through. In fact, he's rubbing the cost of living crisis in their face. Now, here are the facts. The proportion of homeowners falling behind on their mortgage repayments hit an 8-year high in June. The RBA says families missing mortgage repayments has nearly doubled in some hard-hit suburbs. In Sydney, the number of people sleeping on the streets has almost doubled since 2021 during this cost of living crisis. And Food Bank data out today reveals that more than half of households affected by food insecurity are skipping meals or even going an entire day without food. So at the same time that families are skipping meals and children are going to school hungry, Albo, from the block, is buying a waterfront mansion. He is insensitively showing off just how well he's doing, all from taxpayer money, while the country suffers. I mean, it reminds me of Marie Antoinette's infamous saying, let them eat cake. And it makes me wonder whether Albanese actually cares that much about being elected Prime Minister again, whether he truly is desperate to win the election. Because I genuinely don't understand how a politician who wants to win again can buy a multi-million-dollar home when cost of living and housing affordability are the two biggest issues facing Australians. And so astonishing is it that Liberal figure Michael Kroger today said it did look like Albanese might be ready to retire.
It almost looks like a retirement house. It sort of gives the, apart from the cost of living crisis, the housing crisis, etc., it almost gives people the impression that he's setting himself up for retirement, that he's sort of on the way out, that if he loses the election, well, he's got somewhere to go. I think that's a subliminal message that comes out of something like this, which is he's buying a property near the beach. It just gives the impression that he's headed for the door.
And this doesn't just cement the perception that Albanese is out of touch, it shows that he truly is. Because unlike most Australians who are paying more tax than ever thanks to bracket creep, and we know that Australians already have among the highest personal income tax rates in the world, well, unlike most Australians, Albanese had a pay rise this year. He now earns $600,000. All of his flights are paid for, all of his accommodation covered, and on top of this, he's been receiving rental income. Every expense of his is taken care of. He clearly has an entitlement mentality because Albanese's entire life has been spent working for politics or the Labor Party. According to his own official bio, he's only had a job outside of politics for 1 year. He was a bank officer from 1980 to 1981. Now, voters don't hold wealth against politicians when they know that they've worked hard for it. Our country is built on aspiration, and rightly so. But Albanese's personal philosophy has been defined by the class warfare and the politics of envy. That's the genesis of his changes to stage 3 tax cuts, and it's behind his hatred of negative gearing. And voters will hold this house purchase against Albanese because he's been on the public purse his entire life. He loves jet-setting around the globe in Toto One, and now without any expenses to worry about, he's been able to buy a waterfront holiday house. Now, the Prime Minister defended his purchase today by once again speaking about his childhood in Housing Commission.
Of course, I am much better off. As a Prime Minister, I earn a good income. I understand that. I understand that I've been fortunate. But I also know what it's like to struggle. My mum lived in the one public housing that she was born in for all of her 65 years. And I know what it's like, which is why I want to help all Australians into a home.
Mate, I think you're going to have to give the Housing Commission story a rest now that you're a property mogul. Well, Peter Dutton today was asked about this, and he said that many Australians couldn't afford to pay their mortgages because of the government's economic management.
Prime Minister can answer questions in relation to it otherwise, but the homeowners in Australia that I'm worried about at the moment are people who can't afford their mortgages. People have had 12 interest rate increases under this government, and interest rates should come back as they're doing in the United Kingdom, the United States, Canada and New Zealand. But because of Mr Albanese's bad economic management, we're seeing inflation remain higher here, and therefore interest rates remain higher as well.
The Herald Sun political columnist James Campbell said that this was Albanese's Hawaii moment. And like me, Campbell also wondered whether Albanese had given up. And he pointed out that Australians have suffered the biggest fall in their standard of living out of any country in the OECD. He said, but here he is splashing out millions on a bolt hole in a region of Australia where people are living in caravan parks because there's nowhere to rent. Short of using taxpayer money to fly around the country to attend free Taylor Swift and Katy Perry gigs, it's hard to think of a more obvious way of showing he's out of touch with the experiences of ordinary people. And it's true. Albanese has lost touch with the reality of how Australians are struggling. He's now used to having his bum in the butter. He's living a grand old life while making decisions that only prolong inflation and worsen the cost of living crisis.